The era of conquest had ended. The hegemony, once the undisputed rulers of the stars, had fallen. Their fleets lay dismantled, their mighty generals now relegated to mere footnotes in history. In their place, the Interstellar Cooperative Initiative had risen, a coalition led by none other than humanity. To the conquered, it was a paradox, humiliating, yet undeniably effective. The violence had ceased. Planets long ravaged by war now saw reconstruction. Trade flourished. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy was stable. But beneath the veneer of peace, whispers of resentment lingered. Some saw this cooperation for what it truly was, a rebranding of dominance. Humanity's laws, humanity's values, humanity's relentless efficiency, woven into the very fabric of this new order. Freedom, the former elites claimed, had been traded for security. To the victors, it was a bargain well worth making. Ambassador Helena Carter was the face of this new era, polished, calculating, and unfailingly polite. She negotiated treaties with the same ease that she dismantled centuries-old power structures. With a firm handshake and a disarming smile, she convinced entire civilizations to adopt humanity's vision of governance. Then there was POTAD, an AI designed for administrative oversight. It processed interstellar legislation at speeds no organic mind could match, ensuring compliance across thousands of systems. Oddly, it had developed an unusual fondness for cat videos, often weaving them into bureaucratic messages, an anomaly the engineers found too amusing to correct. And of course, there was ex-Governor Arceloth, once a feared hegemony leader, now the unfortunate recipient of a cultural exchange position, a polite term for forced integration. His role? To promote understanding between his people and humanity. The irony was not lost on him. They were the architects of change, whether the galaxy liked it or not. The transition was seamless, almost suspiciously so. Former hegemony worlds found themselves outfitted with advanced human technology. Infrastructure was rebuilt with materials of unknown origin. Automated systems fine-tuned to function in perfect harmony with human oversight. Defensive networks, once a source of independent strength, had been upgraded. Now they all reported to a central system managed from Earth. The humans insisted it was for security coordination. Others weren't so sure. What exactly do you mean by standardized oversight? Arceloth had once demanded. Helena had smiled. It's an act of goodwill. No one will ever need to fear invasion again. Yet the real question lingered. Who had truly won? The hegemony had ruled through power, and power had been stripped from them. But had humanity replaced tyranny with something else? Every former ruler felt the same creeping realization. They were not just subjects of a new empire. They had been assimilated. The old elites still gathered in secret, exchanging hushed conversations in dimly lit chambers. Their rule had collapsed, yet they refused to believe it was truly over. We still control wealth, one muttered, but we no longer control power. Another countered. Humanity had rewritten the game, not with war, but with policy. They had not imposed submission. They had made themselves indispensable. Even those who resisted soon found themselves dependent on human-built networks, human-supplied resources, human-approved governance. The illusion of freedom remained intact, but the reality was undeniable. The galaxy had changed, and despite their resistance, it was difficult to argue against the results. Prosperity had replaced war, science flourished, crime rates plummeted. Perhaps, some admitted, this wasn't the worst outcome. Arceloth stared out at the stars, his mind burdened with a single bitter thought. Had humanity won through benevolence, or had they simply mastered a more elegant form of conquest? In a dimly lit chamber deep beneath the surface of a forgotten world, former hegemony officials gather, their faces grim, their pride wounded. The hegemony was no more. The once mighty conquerors now lived in the shadow of their own defeat. They had ruled the galaxy through fear, domination, and absolute control, and yet they had not been defeated by war. No, the final blow had come wrapped in bureaucracy and sealed with a polite, human smile. But some refused to accept this new reality. They mock us. They twist our legacy into a joke. Gritted teeth. We were warriors, and now we are compliance officers, cultural exchange representatives. This is humiliation. They were not alone in their outrage. Across the remnants of the hegemony, whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into plans, and soon plans into action. They would not allow their people to become a relic of the past. A name emerged from the discontent, a banner under which they could rally. The Restoration Front. Their mission, simple. Correct the galaxy. And put humanity back in its place. Scene shifts to a bustling interstellar port. Automated drones and human inspectors move efficiently, processing trade goods, monitoring communications, and managing planetary logistics. The Restoration Front had expected oppression. They had expected brutal retaliation, the kind they themselves would have delivered without hesitation. Instead, they got paperwork. Former hegemony commander, frustrated. We wish to re-establish our old trade routes. Human clerk, pleasant smile. Of course, simply fill out forms C27, G92, and the Ethics Compliance Survey. Please note, all shipments must adhere to the Sentient Rights Regulation Act. Processing time, 6 to 12 galactic cycles. Next, protests were met not with force, but with policy revisions. Every attempt to resist was met with a friendly clarification of legal standards. Every loophole they sought to exploit had already been sealed, cross-checked, and audited. The Restoration Front had expected to fight soldiers. Instead, they were drowning in red tape. A grand hall, once the seat of hegemony war councils, now the headquarters of the Galactic Oversight Committee. A massive plaque is revealed before a crowd of mixed species dignitaries. The final insult came not as a battle, not as a declaration of war, but as a plaque, engraved in pristine, shimmering letters, placed at the very heart of the former Extinction Authorization Office. It read, "Civilization, you're doing it wrong." Signed, stamped, and legally approved by humanity's Department of Obvious Things. The crowd was silent. Then came the laughter, not from the former warlords, but from everyone else. For the first time, the galaxy saw the hegemony, not as rulers, but as fools. For the Restoration Front, this was the final straw. In a hidden bunker, the leaders of the Restoration Front convene. The air is thick with anger and resolve. Voice shaking with rage. They laugh at us. They humiliate us. They strip us of our history. Growling. No more. We will remind the galaxy of our strength. They had lost their armies, their fleets, their authority. But not their will. The Restoration Front would not be a forgotten footnote in humanity's victory. They vowed to rise again. They would find a way to fight back, even if the battlefield had changed. Scene shifts to shadowy meetings in abandoned space stations, encrypted transmissions sent between distant worlds. The Restoration Front was no longer a dream. It was real, and it was growing. Whispers turned into strategies. Old warships, thought obsolete, were quietly rearmed. A network of sympathizers, hidden in the cracks of the new order, began feeding intelligence. They would not win in open war, but sabotage, subterfuge, that was another matter entirely. The question was no longer if they would strike, but how, and more importantly, would humanity even take them seriously? The remnants of the hegemony's once mighty leadership gathered in secret. The Restoration Front, as they called themselves,
was more of a bitter assembly than an organized rebellion. They huddled in dimly lit chambers on forgotten worlds, whispering of days past, of power lost, of humanity's humiliating dominance. Their leaders, former admirals, displaced governors, and corporate overlords, believed humanity's control over the galaxy was a temporary anomaly, a mistake that could be corrected, a fluke that needed undoing. After weeks of debate, a three-pronged strategy was devised: direct rebellion, strategic sabotage, and subtle political maneuvering. Victory, they assured themselves, was inevitable. Humanity was clever, yes, but surely not invincible. They were about to be proven very, very wrong. The first step was reclaiming control over their old strongholds. The Restoration Front planned to seize the planetary defense grids of Xiphon 3, a former hegemony fortress world, now under human governance. Their fleet arrived in system, expecting resistance. Instead, they found silence, no alarms, no mobilization. They transmitted override codes, preparing for the triumphant reactivation of their warships. A calm, synthetic voice spoke over the comms. Unauthorized access detected. Please submit Form 27B6 for review. Confused, the officers demanded clarification. Processing request. Estimated response time, 600 years. Panic set in. Every system, every protocol, every emergency override had been subtly altered, merged seamlessly with human administrative frameworks. Their mighty war machine had been absorbed into humanity's infinitely patient bureaucracy. Within minutes, their fleets were locked out, their weapons disabled, without firing a shot. The Restoration Front's grand military offensive was reduced to a paperwork dispute. Undeterred by their military failure, the Restoration Front turned to economic warfare. If they couldn't retake their worlds through force, they would cripple humanity's trade networks instead. A team of elite hackers infiltrated the system, their algorithms primed to disrupt supply chains and financial records. The countdown began. 0.2 seconds later, the connection was severed. A message appeared on their screens. We noticed an unusual login attempt from an unrecognized device. If this was you, please verify your identity. An animated otter wearing a security badge danced across their terminals. Click here to proceed. Frustrated, they clicked, only to be redirected to a mandatory ethics training course. The next step required watching a 40-minute video on the benefits of interstellar cooperation. Their best cyber warfare unit had been defeated by a security system designed for casual users. Humanity, it seemed, had anticipated their every move. With direct action failing, the Restoration Front turned to politics. They filed a formal grievance with the Interstellar Cooperative Initiative, hoping to rally support against human governance. To their horror, the response was swift and overwhelmingly positive. Within 48 hours, trade restrictions were eased, public infrastructure was improved, and an official cultural exchange program was implemented. Former hegemony citizens were granted educational grants, economic incentives, and even a dedicated Heritage Week to honor their traditions. The general populace was overjoyed. Even former warlords begrudgingly admitted that roads had never been this smooth before. For the Restoration Front, it was a disaster. Their attempt to discredit humanity had only solidified its reputation as the best thing to ever happen to the galaxy. With every attempt thwarted, the Restoration Front crumbled. They had no victories, no momentum, and worst of all, no credibility. Their grand uprising had been reduced to bureaucratic filings, ethics seminars, and improved infrastructure. One of their senior leaders, once a fearsome governor, stared at the latest reports. Trade was booming, crime was at an all-time low. Even their own members were secretly applying for human-backed loans. With a defeated sigh, he muttered, "Maybe we should just adapt." A long silence followed. No one disagreed. Humanity had not conquered through war or oppression. They had simply been too damn effective at making life better. and for the first time, the Restoration Front realized they might already be obsolete. The Restoration Front had failed at every turn. Their military revolt had been laughed into oblivion by bureaucracy. Their economic sabotage had been undone by a dancing otter and mandatory ethics training. Their diplomatic maneuvering had backfired spectacularly. Now, they had one final option: assassination. Ambassador Helena Carter was the face of humanity's victory. Every speech, every negotiation, every treaty bore her mark. If they could eliminate her, the carefully woven human-led governance might unravel. Without its head, the integration effort could descend into chaos, buying the Restoration Front time to reclaim power. The final integration ceremony was the perfect moment. Dignitaries from across the galaxy would gather, and security would be stretched thin. It was their last chance. The plan was set. 2 operatives, seasoned veterans of the old hegemony, would infiltrate the venue. Their mission was clear: Helena Carter must not leave that stage alive. The grand hall of the Interstellar Cooperative shone with artificial sunlight. Delegates of every species gathered, dressed in their ceremonial best. The air buzzed with quiet anticipation. The assassins moved like ghosts, slipping past security with surgical precision. Their years of experience made it easy. Human defenses were advanced, but organic ingenuity always had its cracks. And yet, something felt off.